Broadcasting live from the mountains of Montana, get ready for an hour of pure, unapologetic conservative talk radio. Liberals beware, because this is the Wise Conservative Show.
Welcome back to another episode of the Wise Conservative Show. I'm your host, Connor Wise. Today is November 8th. Can you believe it? It has already been 1 year since the election of Donald J. Trump to the presidency. It's already been a year, folks. Time has really flown by, and we have seen a lot of stuff happen within this past year. Things that are good and things that are not. But I have a lot of stuff lined up in this episode to kind of go over this past year, kind of go over what exactly has happened, and to discuss some of those things, and as well as some current events after this. But I thought it would be fun to go over this past year on this anniversary of Donald Trump's win in the election. And to start it off, I actually have the clip that I used the day after the election. So just 1 day short of a year ago from today, the clip I used in my show, I have that right now, and I'm going to play it for you guys. It was his acceptance speech, and it kind of sets the mood for the rest of this episode. So take a listen to this clip really quickly, and then we'll get right into the swing of things.
I've just received a call from Secretary Clinton. She congratulated us, it's about us, on our victory, and I congratulated her and her family on a very, very hard-fought campaign. I mean, she fought very hard. Now it's time for America to bind the wounds of division. Have to get together. To all Republicans and Democrats and independents across this nation, I say it is time for us to come together as one united people. I pledge to every citizen of our land that I will be president for all Americans, and this is so important to me. For those who have chosen not to support me in the past, of which there were a few people, I'm reaching out to you for your guidance and your help so that we can work together and unify our great country. As I've said from the beginning, ours was not a campaign, but rather an incredible and great movement made up of millions of hardworking men and women who love their country and want a better, brighter future for themselves and for their family. I've spent my entire life in business looking at the untapped potential in projects and in people all over the world. That is now what I want to do for our country. Every single American will have the opportunity to realize his or her fullest potential. The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer. No dream is too big, no challenge is too great. Nothing we want for our future is beyond our reach. America will no longer settle for anything less than the best. I want to tell the world community that while we will always put America's interests first, we will deal fairly with everyone, all people and all other nations. We will seek common ground, not hostility, partnership, not conflict.
So if you guys remember that speech, it was one of his best speeches to that point. And it really was reminiscent of a Ronald Reagan speech in the layout and the wording of certain areas of it. I remember being extremely shocked about how well written the speech was. And it was one of his greatest deliveries to that point. Of course, he's improving every time in his speeches, and they're getting better and better and more presidential as time goes on. But that was really a great speech of his, and it really showed that he wants to unify the nation. It really showed that he was a supporter of the messages that he actually claimed in his campaign and that he wanted to make those changes. Now, a year down the road, what exactly has happened? See, we've seen so many different things happen. We've seen disputes, we've seen division, we've seen probes that go on and on. You see, in the days after President Trump's election last year, Gallup conducted a poll finding that now this was a record high, 77% of Americans think the country is divided on key values. Now, we do definitely see that the country hasn't demonstrated much more unification since that point. Trump's inauguration was countered by massive protests in cities across the entire nation. Far less activists have rioted on college campuses, and far-right demonstrators have also taken to the streets, such as in Charlottesville, where there was even a counter-protester killed in August. The president's approach to politics, which we've seen largely through his Twitter account, has also fueled divisions on Capitol Hill, where moderate Republicans are increasingly speaking out against the president, but also polarization within not only our party, but within the entire nation is taking place. We see Democrats and politicians in both parties taking to Twitter more and more now to air their grievances, but most of the time just to yell at our president. The most outspoken of those are senators such as Bob Corker and Jeff Flake, who plan to retire after this term because of all the outrage that's coming towards them after they speak out against the president. Now, we've seen politics take into investigations, more so than ever before in the past. We've seen so many investigations take place within this past year. There was, of course, the sequence that started all of this was Trump's firing of James Comey as the director of the FBI. And that's when Special Counsel Robert Mueller was appointed to investigate the Russian meddling in the election and possible Trump collusion. The first indictments were just announced last week, though they didn't speak specifically to campaign collusion with Moscow. The investigation is still going on, and as are related congressional investigations, giving Democrats a hook for continuing to question the fairness of last year's election, and they continue to take that and they continue to run with it. They continue to say that Donald Trump's an illegitimate president to this day. They continue to claim that President Trump isn't doing what he's supposed to, that he shouldn't even be in office. 1 year later, they're still claiming that. We see that Republicans have increasingly countered with allegations of their own in terms of collusion against Democrats. Some are even calling for the appointment of a second special counsel to investigate Obama and Clinton-era controversies, including claims that the Clinton email case was mishandled and questions over how much the FBI relied on a research firm that commissioned the unverified anti-Trump dossier. It has recently emerged that the research was funded with the help from the Clinton campaign and the Democratic Party. Now, we've also seen immigration crackdown happening. Now, during the actual campaign, there was no other promise that was as loud and as repeated and as backed as Donald Trump's promise to build the border wall. We saw people chanting it day in and day out. We saw people really wanting this to happen. You see, implementing these policies wasn't really easy for him, but he's already in the process of doing this. We've seen that he's definitely trying to take back the Obama year policies. Shortly after taking office on January 20th, he signed an executive order temporarily banning immigration from several majority Muslim countries while restricting the entry from some Syrian refugees. Now, as the liberal media called this, the Muslim ban. That led to protests across the entire nation and federal court challenges from uber-liberal court systems, which forced the administration to revise the order. Last month, the ban expired, as the administration keeps pursuing revised rules. Trump has also tasked Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, with ramping up enforcement of immigration laws, including cracking down on sanctuary cities by threatening to deny them federal funding. He also announced plans to end DACA, the Obama-era executive action protecting young immigrants from deportation, while also calling on Congress to pass a remedy for that. Now, all of this has been complicated by Trump's public criticism of Sessions for recusing himself from the Russia investigation. Now, the wall on the southern border still hasn't been built, folks. We all know this, and we all want it to be built. And we do know that Mexico still insists it won't pay for it, as Trump did sometimes promise on the campaign trail. But we did see recently that Customs and Border Protection Agency recently unveiled prototypes of a new wall design from several contractors. So what we saw was a list of 5 or 6 different walls that had a section built, and they showed them off. They showed these different designs that could be happening, that will happen in the future. Folks, the wall is going to be built. The wall is already in the process of having that happen. They're just getting all the details down. That promise is going to be completed, and it will be completed soon, folks. But one of the best things that we've seen happen are regulations being rolled back. Gridlock in Congress definitely has not stopped the president from unraveling Barack Obama's executive action legacy, with Trump portraying his regulatory rollbacks as a boon for business, which it definitely is. That includes withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement, greenlighting the Dakota Access and Keystone XL oil pipelines, moving to roll back the Clean Power Plan, and using the Congressional Review Act. Of course, that's an obscure rule-killing law to wipe out a wave of last-minute regulations pushed through by the Obama administration right before Trump took office. But of course, there's definitely danger in the world that Donald Trump is facing every single day. He spent a considerable amount of his time over the last 12 months dealing with threats at home and abroad. The Islamic State orchestrated terror attacks and declared a caliphate in Iraq and Syria during the 2016 presidential campaign. Of course, Trump famously promised to bomb ISIS. Last month, after the liberation of Raqqa, the president boasted that, quote, more progress had been made against these evil terrorists in the past several months than in the past several years. Now, we've seen the fight being taken to ISIS more and more and more every day. We've seen President Trump doing what he promised, doing what our previous president could not do. But sadly, there's also tensions with North Korea that are increasing every single day. They've definitely escalated since Donald Trump took office, with the president mocking Kim Jong-un as, quote, Little Rocket Man, which is very catchy, and I'm glad he did bring that up, because everyone's getting on board with that nickname, including the South Korean president. Of course, he's mocking him over their nuclear program. And during a speech in South Korea this week, the president warned North Korea, quote, do not underestimate us, and do not try us. As for the nuclear threat from Iran, Trump announced last month that he would decertify the 2015 Obama-era Iran nuclear deal, which was quite honestly the worst deal that has ever been made in history. President Trump, during the campaign, said that he would tear this up, and he's finally getting around to that. And this is something that should have happened much sooner, because the Iran nuclear deal has been hurtful for the entire world. It has made it a much more dangerous place by putting Iran at the top of the Middle East as the most powerful nation in the Middle East with possibly nuclear weapons, while they're threatening our ally of Israel and they're threatening us. We've also seen that in recent months, Donald Trump has flown on Air Force One to sites of deadly disasters in the country, including hurricanes in Texas, Florida, and Puerto Rico. He also traveled to Las Vegas last month after the terrible shooting, which was, of course, the deadliest mass shooting in the U.S. history. Democrats have reiterated their calls for new gun control measures in the wake of more mass shootings, including after the slaughter at a Texas church last weekend. But the NRA-backed president has suggested he has no appetite for restricting the gun ownership of law-abiding Americans. Now, what's actually going on in the West Wing, folks? There's definitely been no shortage of drama, rivalries, or turnover inside the West Wing. Many aides, including National Security Advisor Mike Flynn, Chief Strategist Steve Bannon, Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, Press Secretary Sean Spicer, well, they all joined the White House at the beginning of the administration, but since have been fired or resigned from their positions. And then we have the famous Anthony Scaramucci, lasting just 10 days in office. And the presence of Trump's daughter Ivanka Trump and son-in-law Jared Kushner as White House aides has complicated dynamics according to the liberal media. But some of that drama has calmed since the summer selection of retired Marine General and Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly for White House's Chief of Staff. Kelly has attempted to bring order to the West Wing, and he's definitely done that. And that's, of course, as the president pushes Congress to pass a tax reform package. That's, of course, another campaign promise that they're finally getting to within Congress and within the White House. In an op-ed for USA Today just today, marking the anniversary of the election, Vice President Mike Pence argued that tax reform would pass in the Republican-controlled Congress by the end of the year. Quote, "It has been a year of accomplishments and we're just getting started. Before this year is out, we'll pass historic tax cuts for the American people. And with President Trump's leadership, I know we will make America great again." Folks, a lot has happened in 1 year. A lot has happened that has both been good and been bad, but a lot has happened not only in the White House, but abroad. We've had rollbacks. We've had things that needed to happen. We've had people starting on tax reform. Our nation, all in all, is at a better point than it was 1 year ago. Stock markets have reached record highs because of the policy changes that President Trump has already put into place, because of what they expect he's going to do in the future. Our economy is starting to pick up and grow at a faster rate than it did in any of the years under Obama. Our nation is already at a much better place than it ever was under our previous president. And that's after 1 year of a President Trump. I'm excited to see what the future has in store for this president. I'm excited to see what our nation has in store in the future. But on that note, I'm going to take a quick commercial break. Don't go anywhere. This is The Wise Conservative Show. Hey everybody, Connor Wise here with an exclusive sneak peek of The Wise Conservative Show. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. With universal health care, which is essentially the next step beyond Obamacare, this is where Democrats want to take the country. This is where the left wants us to go. With universal health care, now there's no insurance companies, no one competing whatsoever, and the government controls it all.
Calling all young conservatives. Have you ever wanted to write for an online publication? What about host your own conservative radio program? Now you can, thanks to YouthRevolt.org. Youth Revolt is a conservative media network for young people, the goal of which is to educate our fellow Americans, and also to expose the left-wing indoctrination that goes on in classrooms across the country. Become part of a team that is dedicated to taking the country back, one radio program or opinion column at a time. If you're interested, go to YouthRevolt.org and click on Join Us on the top of the page. Fill out our brief questionnaire, and one of our representatives will be in touch with you in no time at all. The time to reclaim our future is now. Be a part of something that's bigger than yourself, and join the movement today. Youth Revolt. Speak without fear. My friends, I'm going to be blunt with you. There are a lot of frauds out there today. People who claim to be conservatives and yet, in one way or another, believe that more government is the solution to our problems. That's not what conservatism is about, and even more than that, that's not what our Constitution is about. I'm Jason Veely, a recent college grad who has the guts to say what needs to be said without pulling any punches. On my radio show, you can expect 100% pure conservatism every single weeknight at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. Join me as we discuss history, liberty, and conservative philosophy in a style that is just as entertaining as it is educational. Who says we can't have fun tearing down the liberal establishment? Tune in to the Jason Veely program live every weeknight at 7 o'clock on YouthRevolt.org. I'll see you out on the battlefield.
America is known for its expansive wilderness for all to explore. and for many, that exploration is an important hobby. This exploration is why The Survivalist was created. On this blog, you will find expansive information on all things wilderness, from what knife you should carry to what backpack gives you the best bang for your buck. This group of 4 writers has created a very diversified and useful site, which I personally recommend. This site has given me much knowledge on a variety of topics, and I urge you to check it out at the-survivalist.weebly.com. Once again, that is the-survivalist.weebly.com.
I was assuming that it meant coverage, but if he says that there's a small group of people who understood what it was, so I'm like, what is it? What is confetti?
It gets 2 scoops. You know, everyone around the table gets 1, and no word if there were sprinkles.
He paid $38 million, looks like $38 million in taxes.
Are you tired of listening to the snowflake liberal media report about ice cream scoops and typos instead of real facts? Well, at the Wise Conservative Show, we promise you that we will not report about Kofifi, but instead about the truth, instead about the facts about what's going on in our nation. Join us every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on the Wise Conservative Show for your dose of unapologetic conservative talk radio. The Wise Conservative Show, only on U3 Volt. Welcome back to the Wise Conservative Show. Once again, I am your host, Connor Wise. Now, after we got that recap of this past year, let's jump into some actual current events and, well, some criticisms and what exactly some Democrats are saying about our president. So we're seeing now that a top California Democrat posted a Twitter storm of criticisms that he said were to recognize the 1 year since President Trump being elected. And by the way, he has called President Trump, quote, the worst president in modern history. Now, I've talked about him before because he's always in the headlines for making absurd comments and, quite honestly, just speaking out against things that he really shouldn't be. This is Representative Adam Schiff. He's the top Democrat on the committee tasked with investigating possible collusion between Donald Trump and Russian actors. And he definitely slammed the president online. So he began with, quote, 1 year ago, Donald Trump was elected president. Since then, he has repeatedly shown why he is the worst president in modern history. After that, he began a series of at least a dozen criticisms highlighting actions taken by the Trump administration since November 8th last year. So let's actually read these other quotes and other tweets that he sent out. Quote, almost immediately after the election, the president-elect falsely claimed to have won the popular vote and said that millions of illegal immigrants voted. Now, then he went on to say, without checking the Pentagon, POTUS banned trans soldiers from serving our country. It was ugly, wrong, and unconstitutional. Trump has repeatedly tried to intervene in our justice system and denied judges who ruled against him as illegitimate or so-called judges. After the white supremacist rally in Charlottesville, POTUS found fault on, quote, many sides. There were not many sides, just right and wrong. The president withdrew from the Paris Accords, forever damaging our planet and our standing in the world. Climate change is real and we must act. In his first week of office, POTUS signed the Muslim ban, banning people from entering our country based on their faith. So this is really all that he got at in terms of actual policies. But you can see there's plenty of flaws in what he said here. And it's kind of sad because he's a representative. He should actually have facts down. But then he said, Let's just break down a few of these. He said that without checking with the Pentagon, that President Trump banned soldiers, trans soldiers, from serving. President Trump never actually banned anyone. He said that he thinks it should happen when he tweeted that on Twitter, but he never actually banned anyone. That's just another lie that the media has been portraying for many months now. President Trump never banned anyone from serving in our military. Now, what's wrong with the Charlottesville rallies, the riots in Charlottesville? President Trump called out all the people who were acting wrong and who were evil and who were demonstrating different actions that shouldn't have happened. He called out everyone who did that. And then he was attacked for it. And many people said that he didn't even condemn what was happening. But as we all know, President Trump condemned it. As we all know, President Trump called out that evil. As we all know, President Trump already said that that shouldn't be happening. But he's continually attacked by liberals because they say that he didn't do it right. Now, in his first week of office, Adam Schiff claims he signed a Muslim ban. Now, I talked about this a lot in a previous episode. This was months ago, folks, but I talked about how that wasn't a Muslim ban. This did not target all Muslims in the world. This did not target every single person of that religious faith. What this did was target countries that the Obama administration chose as high terrorist risks. It wasn't even the Trump administration that selected these nations. It was the Obama administration. But because it was President Trump putting out this plan, it was deemed as racist, it was deemed as Islamophobic, it was deemed as a Muslim ban, even though he was just trying to protect our nation. And they're continuing that notion to today. Folks, there are so many different lies and agendas that the left has been pushing since Donald Trump's election that are so false and so devious. Because they're pushing all these lies and they know that they're wrong, but they continue to say them. Even though they know that it was President Obama who chose those countries, they continue to say that Donald Trump was being racist here, that he was being Islamophobic here. Even though President Trump didn't actually ban anyone from joining the military, he just thought that should happen. They still say that he did. Now, they also attack him for withdrawing from the Paris Accords. Folks, the Paris Accords did not help whatsoever. Now, I don't have the study anymore because that was months ago that this happened. But if you look back at that episode that I talked about this, I had a study that showed that there was no help. The Paris Accords did not help the environment whatsoever, but what they actually did was hurt the economy. They almost put an entire industry out of business. They almost made millions of people lose their jobs. That's not good for the economy, and that's not good for a nation whatsoever. The Paris Accords have not helped, and they're not going to help. There is no reason for us to be in that agreement. Folks, all of these things that President Trump have done have been good things. President Trump hasn't been the terrible president that so many people claim. They only say that because no matter what happens, whether it's good or bad, they say that it was the worst thing that has ever happened. Whether it's deeming the heroin or the opiate epidemic as a national emergency, or whether it's trying to protect our nation from terrorists. It's always deemed as racist, as homophobic, as Islamophobic, all those different names that the liberals always call conservatives. No matter what it is. The Trump administration cannot do anything right according to the media. According to these alt-left activists, anything he does is fascist, anything he does is wrong, and he can't do anything right. And that's exactly why we have a House Democrat demanding that Trump is impeached by Christmas. Now, we've heard from Texas Democrat Al Green before. Now he's giving his colleagues within the House a deadline to vote on impeaching President Trump. Now, he said, quote, "I now announce that before Christmas, there will be a vote on the chief inciter of racism, bigotry, hatred, xenophobia, sexism, and ethnocentrism." And he said that on the House floor, adding that he prayed the United States will, quote, "continue to reject what the inciter-in-chief Donald J. Trump has been causing this country to have to endure." Let's look at this. Let's look at all these words. Racism, bigotry, hatred, xenophobia, sexism, ethnocentrism. Now that's a new one. I haven't heard anyone call them that yet. But besides that, these are all the words that I just said in the last bit that they commonly use to call conservatives. If you have a conservative viewpoint, that's what they call you. That's what they say about you. Now, definitely this isn't the first time that Green has called for impeaching the president. He just hasn't put a time frame on it now. We see time after time that he has actually called and written up formal articles of impeachment, though it has never made it to the House floor for a vote. And I actually have the audio from when he originally brought up those impeachment articles. So take a listen to just how delusional he sounds.
I rise today, Mr. Speaker, to call for the impeachment of the President of the United States of America for obstruction of justice. I do not do this for political purposes, Mr. Speaker. I do this because I believe in the great ideals that this country stands for. Liberty and justice for all. The notion that we should have government of the people, by the people, for the people. I do it because, Mr. Speaker, there is a belief in this country that no one is above the law, and that includes the President of the United States of America. Mr. Speaker, our democracy is at risk. Mr. Speaker, this offense has occurred before our very eyes. It is perspicuous. It is easy to understand. Mr. Speaker, we are talking about a president who fired the FBI director who was investigating the president for his connections to Russian involvement in the president's election. Mr. Speaker, this is not about the president firing the FBI director because he was investigating someone else. It's because the FBI director was investigating the president himself. And after firing the director, he went on to let us know that he considered the investigation when he fired him. And then he tweeted language that would be intimidation or a warning, an admonition, very strong to say the very least. Mr. Speaker, we cannot allow this to go unchecked. The president is not above the law. It is time for the American people to weigh in.
Folks, Al Green has been making these crazy notions, these crazy calls for a long time now. He's been calling for impeachment for months, and it just isn't what's going to happen, folks. Now, we definitely see that he acknowledges that conservatives aren't likely to jump on board for this and kick Trump out of the Oval Office. But he did say, quote, whatever others will do is their choice. My conscience dictates that I will vote to impeach. Now, there's not even much enthusiasm amongst most congressional Democrats to impeach our president. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi has repeatedly downplayed talk of impeachment, and just this past Sunday told CNN it wasn't one of her legislative priorities. Folks, impeachment for Donald Trump is not viable because he has not broken the law. Al Green wants President Trump to be impeached because of political differences. He said in there, this is not because of political differences. But why would you even have to say that if it wasn't because of it? If he truly did break the law, it would be obvious why he would be doing that. It would be obvious why they were drawing up those papers. Folks, this is another notion that President Trump has broken the law, and he's putting a deadline on this. The way he worded this, I now announce that before Christmas there will be a vote. That's not how Congress works. That's not how the House works. You can't put a deadline on your legislation because you think that it's the most important thing. It hasn't even made it to the floor for a vote yet because the people do not want to vote on it. The representatives do not want this to be voted on. It hasn't gone out of committee because of that. These congressional Democrats and even congressional Republicans have been fighting it and saying that it's not viable, that it's not truly what needs to happen. But Al Green is delusional. Al Green continues to ignore facts. Al Green continues to call for the impeachment of a man who has done nothing wrong. A man who has helped our economy, a man who has helped our nation and kept it safe, a man who is working day in and day out to help all of us within America. But because he has an R next to his name, Al Green thinks he should be impeached. That's not the attitude of a representative to me. That's not the attitude of a leader of our nation to me. That's the attitude of a 5-year-old who wants their toy back. That's not how leaders are supposed to act, folks. And it's sad that we have representatives that continue to act that petty. I'm going to take one last quick commercial break. Don't go anywhere. This is The Wise Conservative Show. Hey everybody, Connor Wise here with an exclusive sneak peek of The Wise Conservative Show. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. What it means to be a conservative is very simple. It means that you want to protect freedoms and liberties. You want to protect the Constitution and limit the government. It's a very simple definition. It's a very simple cause to follow. And this is what a lot of people do kind of value conservatism as.
Ever wanted to learn the history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in less than 10 minutes? Are you looking for the truth about the so-called gender wage gap? Well, my friends, I'll let you in on a little secret. Prager University is a source that I use all the time when preparing for my show, The Jason Veely Program. Dennis Prager and his team have put together a remarkable organization that seeks to explain and spread Americanism through the power of the internet. Their short yet extremely informative videos reach more than 100 million people per year, and they want to reach you as well. Go on YouTube and type in Prager University, or go to prageru.com for all of their latest content. That's Prager, the letter U.com. prageru.com.
Hey everybody, Connor Wise here with an exclusive sneak peek of The Wise Conservative Show. Don't go anywhere, I'll be right back. With universal health care, which is essentially the next step beyond Obamacare, this is where Democrats want to take the country. This is where the left wants us to go. With universal health care, now there's no insurance companies, no one competing whatsoever, and the government controls it all. Have you ever wanted to stand up to your liberal professor? Have you ever wanted to help expand the conservative movement? Well, it sounds like you would be a perfect fit for Youth Revolt. Youth Revolt is a team of dedicated young conservatives fighting liberal indoctrination within our school system. If you're interested in being a part of this team by being a columnist or even hosting your own radio show, go ahead and click the Join Now tab at the top of youthrevolt.org. You'll be asked to answer a few questions, and a Youth Revolt team member will respond to you quickly. Be a part of something bigger than you. Be a part of Youth Revolt. Speak without fear.
If you got a business, that you didn't build that. Somebody else made that happen.
Get out of here, you idiot. Sorry about that, folks. Jason Veely here, host of the Jason Veely program. I'm a 22-year-old conservative who is fired up and ticked off at the direction the progressive left have taken this country. Join me every weeknight at 7 o'clock as we promote liberty, advance conservative principle, and work to restore the Constitution of the United States. I can get loud and I can get passionate. How can we afford not to when so much is on the line? Tune in to the Jason Veely program, live every weeknight at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time on youthrevolt.org. I'll see you out on the battlefield.
I was assuming that it meant coverage, but if he says that there's a small group of people who understood what it was, so I'm like, what is it? What is Confetti?
It gets 2 scoops. Everyone around the table gets 1, and no word if there were sprinkles.
He paid $38 million, looks like $38 million in taxes.
Are you tired of listening to the snowflake liberal media report about ice cream scoops and typos instead of real facts? Well, at the Wise Conservative Show, we promise you that we will not report about Kofifi, but instead about the truth. Instead, about the facts about what's going on in our nation. Join us every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on the Wise Conservative Show for your dose of unapologetic conservative talk radio. The Wise Conservative Show, only on Youth Revolt. Welcome back to the Wise Conservative Show. Once again, I'm your host, Connor Wise. Now, we've definitely seen more shootings, mass shootings, in the past few months than we should have. And we just saw one at a Texas church, of course. Now, if you don't know, this past shooting was stopped by an armed civilian. But we see that that's not really the first time that we've seen a good guy with the gun taking out the bad guy with the gun. It's more common than you would think, even though we constantly see liberals and Democrats criticizing legal gun owners, saying that we're the problem. Now, of course, we've seen that this guy that stopped this most recent mass shooting, if you don't know, he was a former National Rifle Association NRA instructor. He actually lives next door to the First Baptist Church of Sutherland Spring, Texas. He grabbed his rifle after hearing the gunfire and went over to investigate. Confronting the shooter, Devin Kelly, Wilford shot him in the leg and torso before Kelly dropped his weapon and fled the scene in his SUV. As horrific as Kelly's rampage was, we know that it could have been worse if it weren't for Stephen Wilford. He said, quote, "I thank my God, my Lord, protected me and gave me the skills to do what needed to be done. I just wish I could have gotten there faster." Of course, he's quickly become an example for many advocates of gun rights to point out that when defending their argument that the best defense against mass shooting is a better armed and better trained civilian populace that is ready to defend itself anytime and anywhere. You know, while it's not as common compared to the overall number of mass shootings in the U.S., Wilford is definitely not the first good guy with a gun to stop a mass shooter's killing spree in recent years. Definitely the number of mass shootings and how many people have actually stopped these shootings differs from many experts because whether you count off-duty police officers as civilians, military members as civilians, or even the number of people needed to be killed for it to be a mass shooting, that all differs. But the point still remains. The people have stopped these attacks in the past by having legal ownership of guns. Here are a few examples of this. In 1997, the assistant principal of Mississippi's Pearl High School, Joel Myrick, used the .45 caliber semi-automatic pistol he kept in his truck to detain 16-year-old Luke Woodham after the teenager stabbed and bludgeoned to death his mother at home and killed 2 students and injured 7 at the high school. So he stopped him before he could do more. A decade later, in 2007, Matthew Murray killed 4 people at Colorado Spring Church before being shot by church member and volunteer security guard Gianna Som. Last April, an Uber driver with a concealed carry permit shot and wounded a gunman who opened fire on a crowd of people in Chicago's Logan Square. And this September, an usher at a Tennessee church used his personal firearm to subdue a masked gunman who had already killed 1 woman in the church's parking lot and injured 6 others inside. Now, not only do these gun-carrying civilians prove that an armed populace can help mitigate the death toll of these shootings, but it could also prevent the mass shootings as a whole from happening. John Lott, the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, said, quote, "These killers all say they target places where people normally don't carry guns. So concealed carry acts as a deterrent to these killers and would also stop these shootings from being much worse." Of course, we see those in favor of limiting access to firearms argue that many of these mass shooters should not have had access to a gun in the first place, given some of their criminal and mental health records, and that, quote, "good guy with a gun stops a bad guy with a gun" argument is unsupported by facts or research. Avery Gardner, the co-president of the Brady campaign, said, quote, "if having more guns in society worked to deter shootings, then America would have the lowest rate of gun violence of any developed country. Put simply, the myth that the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun is unsupported by facts or research. The killer in this mass shooting should never have had access to a gun in the first place, given his criminal record." Now, we see that the most recent shooting with at this church, we see that Devin Kelly didn't acquire his gun legally. We see that Devin Kelly had an illegal firearm, that he wouldn't have been able to acquire a gun based on laws because he had a very intense criminal record. But they leave out that fact for this most recent shooting. They say that it's not supported by facts, but we see time after time that these shootings are stopped by a good guy with a gun. They say that they won't be able to get guns if we pass more laws. Folks, criminals by definition do not follow laws. Criminals by definition will not follow these laws. And we've seen from research and from facts that they target places where they don't think there will be guns. It's common sense. We've seen other studies in the past where robbers have said that they don't target houses with American flags out front because generally those houses have guns more than the other houses. These criminals are targeting places that they don't think there will be someone who can stop them. Passing laws is not going to stop any of this. Allowing legal citizens to be properly trained and know how to properly handle these firearms so that they can protect themselves and protect their fellow citizens. That's how we stop these. That's how we prevent these. That's how these are actually going to get better. We see that everywhere where there's massive gun control, there's still very high crime rates. Chicago, Australia. And the fact that they always say that we have the highest gun violence within the entire world by a massive amount. Folks, if you take gang violence out of that, if you take the gang violence out from all the big cities, our gun violence is right on par with the rest of the world. We don't have as big of an issue as liberals would have you believe. The issue is people trying to limit the rights of our citizens, people trying to limit the accessibility to these protection firearms. It's the Democrats who are making this a much more dangerous place. But they continue to try to say that it works, that gun control works, but they have no real examples of it working. There was still a mass shooting in California, another state that has massive gun control. There's shootings every day in Chicago. Places such as England and Australia where there's massive gun control, their violent crime rate is just as high as it was before they implemented the control. There is no example where gun control truly works, folks. There's no example where banning guns, where restricting the use of guns for citizens, where limiting the rights of citizens ever helps. We saw from this most recent shooting that they still go around the law, that they still get weapons around the law, like Devin Kelly did. And they will continue to do that, even if we pass more laws, folks. All right, that's all for today's episode of The Wise Conservative Show. I'd like to thank you all for tuning in. As always, I have been your host, Connor Wise. You can find me on youthrevolt.org. Go ahead and search Youth Revolt up on Facebook. You can find me on Spreaker.com/The Wise Conservative and subscribe to my podcast on iTunes. I'd like to once again thank you all for tuning in. And as always, God bless.